entitled Karen Tried to Steal My Dad's Inheritance. I apologize in advance for not knowing the legal terms in English. This took place in a non-English speaking country, so I've tried to explain this the best I can. Before I begin, here's some background info on the inheritance laws of my country. In my country, if you own land, you can't do whatever you want with it when your spouse dies. If you have direct heirs, aka children. Let's say you and your spouse own a large piece of land. You have 3 children together. Your spouse dies, and you want to sell the property. Before you can do that, though, you have to give your children their share of the inheritance from their deceased parent. It has to be a fair price, aka market value. Once you have paid them out, you can do whatever you want with the property. If you aren't capable of doing so, you can't sell. Now to the story. My paternal grandma and her 2 sisters owned a cabin together. When this took place in 2006, the oldest sister had already passed away, and her share was inherited by her children, my dad's cousins. They're not important to the story. This story is about my grandma, my dad, and my grandma's younger sister, Karen. Karen was the baby of the family, the golden child. She was superficially charming, had married up, and was very used to get her way. I don't think she was ever told no. Karen loved the cabin and spent most weekends there. My dad's cousins were not interested in selling their share of the property, but Karen had been wanting Grandma's share for years. My grandma and dad spent very little time there, but Grandma paid her share on all repairs on the property. Another thing about my grandma was that she never dealt with money of any kind. Grandpa took care of everything related to property, taxes, etc. He died a few years before this took place, and my dad had to take on everything related to this, as Grandma was too anxious to do it. She never paid Dad his part of the inheritance from Grandpa. Karen was well aware of this. In addition, Grandma had battled cancer for a number of years at this point. It wasn't super aggressive, and she was given medicines that allowed her to be comfortable. She would not drop dead any minute. Still, she was reduced physically, and was a very anxious person in general. In the winter of 2006, Karen paid Grandma a visit. She stayed overnight, something she never did. A few days later, Dad called Grandma for a chat. Grandma mentioned that Karen had been there, and that they had reached an agreement about the cabin. That Karen had brought some papers for Grandma to sign. My dad immediately knew something was amiss. What papers? It wasn't the deed, was it? Well, yes, Grandma confirmed. She told Dad that Karen had come to see her, that she wanted to buy her share of the cabin, that she had brought the deed already. It just needed Grandma's signature. She said Karen had asked her for a price, and Grandma, who knew nothing about money and the actual worth of anything, suggested $3,000. I think it's a different currency, but that's roughly the sum in today's money. Dad was livid. First, that's nowhere close to the actual value of the property, and second, the way Karen went about it. She basically ambushed Grandma with the deed, and she stayed overnight to make sure she kept complete control of the situation so Grandma could not call Dad to discuss it with him. Dad was not opposed to the idea of selling Grandma's share to Karen, but it would have to be at market price. Karen knew this. Dad immediately called Karen, told her this was unacceptable, and that he was going to contest the sale. Karen just told him that this was what Grandma wanted, that she set the price herself, and that Karen had done nothing wrong. Dad got a lawyer ASAP, and so did Karen. They went back and forth the entire spring and summer. Dad refused to relent. Karen kept proclaiming her right. Grandma was distraught. To her, a feud within the family was the worst that could ever happen. She begged Dad to let it go. Dad refused. This was his inheritance. At the very beginning of 2007, it finally went to trial. The trial only lasted a couple of hours. According to my parents, the judge threw the book at Karen. The sale was a blatant violation of our country's inheritance laws and was ruled null and void. The ownership was transferred back to Grandma. My mom later told me Karen walked into the courtroom all cocky and self-assured, there to claim her right. As the judge kept going through the documentation and kept on asking questions, her demeanor became more and more defeated. At the end, she just hung her head. A week after the trial, Grandma passed away. Karen did not attend the funeral. Before all this, Karen and Dad got on really well. After, they would never speak again. After Grandma died, Dad wanted to sell his share of the cabin, but he would never sell to Karen. Ever. That was forever off the table. He approached his cousins, explained the entire ugly situation, and proposed them to buy his share. Thankfully, they were interested and bought him out at a fair price. After her defeat in court and the death of the sister she tried to scam, Karen spent very little time at the cabin. For the first time in her life, she had been told a firm no. This was something she had really wanted, and for the first time, it didn't go her way. Clearly, it was too bitter. There's no happy ending to this story, only a message that greed and entitlement can ruin your prospects and burn family relations to the ground.